Hello, I'm George. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And today I'm in Somerset. It's a beautiful sunny spring afternoon and I'm by Castle Naroche, or Castle Naroche as the locals say it. And I'm going to be painting a plein air landscape, and I'm going to be using canvas panels, a slightly smaller scale than usual. I'm using 8 by 10 inches. I normally like to paint a bit bigger, but this is what I had lying around, and I'm using my Alla Prima art carrier, the Alla Prima thin panel carrier, to carry the panels. And if you're looking for a way to carry your wet paintings to and from your painting spot, then I certainly suggest looking at Alla Prima art carrier. I'll put a link in the description. I'm a little bit biased because it is my own invention, but I find it really helpful. I use it all the time. And so yeah, so I'm here with Tilly. Hello Tilly, my companion, who's going to be with me whilst I make this painting. And I love how we get some really lovely views around this area, around this part of Somerset. We're quite high up, so I'm going to try and paint a vista, perhaps have some atmospheric perspective going on as the rolling hills get lost into the sky as they keep receding into the distance. And yeah, so I'm just trying to find a good spot to paint. I'm a bit spoilt for choice. Often trying to find the painting spot is one of the hardest parts of plein air painting. It's always something that you should take into consideration when you're on a tight schedule, trying to figure out how long you have to paint. Always take into account how long it's going to take you to actually find and decide on what spot you want to paint in. It's still quite early in the afternoon, so I've got plenty of time to paint. So I think this is a really lovely spot to paint. A really nice view. You really see those rolling hills, that countryside which is so iconic to Somerset and the southwest. A lot of things going on here, a lot of different trees. We've got some cows in the distance, and I think this is going to be a good spot, so I'm going to set up and let's start painting. First, I've toned my canvas panel with a layer of raw sienna paint, which has quite a nice warm orangey colour to it, and as it's a sunny day, some of this warmth of the underlayer will show through the paint in certain areas and give this warm, harmonious glow to the painting. I start by painting in the upper section of the sky, which is the area of sky which has the deepest and most chromatic blue. And as the sky gets lower down on the painting, you get a lot of clouds in the sky, and the areas of sky which do break through the clouds are lighter and slightly warmer in colour temperature as well. And now I'm going in and painting the lightest sections of the clouds, so the tops of the clouds which are catching direct sunlight. In order to create this bright impression, I'm using titanium white and a small touch of cadmium yellow just to give them a slightly warm glow. which makes them even more vibrant in contrast to the blue sky. And as I paint these light sections of the clouds, I apply the paint quite thickly by really loading up my brush. That way the mix goes onto the painting very boldly without mixing with the other colours. And also the brush that I'm using for this mix, I'm only going to use for the light mix, as if I've used this brush for another mix already, then that will dull down the light mix a bit and you won't be able to capture that really bright white glow that you get from the upper sections of these clouds. I'm now painting in the darker underbellies of the clouds, and this helps give the clouds that sense of form. And even though these darker sections are darker than the lighter sections of the clouds or the sky behind it, I'm not painting them that dark. I'm still adding a lot of titanium white into the mix. And if you compare, let's say, this colour mix compared to the raw umber that I used in the undersketch, you can see it's not as dark as my raw umber paint. And the reason for this is that even though there is variety within the sky is still a very light section of the painting. If you squint at the foreground or just squint at the scene in general, the sky will disappear into a light, bright haze. And you often see this if you take a photo of something outdoors. Sometimes if you aren't focusing on the sky, the whole sky turns to white, even if when you're actually looking at the sky in person you can see all these clouds and these shadows in the clouds. When you actually look at the sky as a whole, it is definitely grouped into the light value range of the painting. As I paint these clouds, I'm trying to keep the edges quite soft, especially the edges underneath the clouds where they merge into the sky. I'm trying to push the edges so that they're so soft that they're almost lost, and this actually makes the clouds look even more realistic, as if you paint really harsh edges around the entire cloud, the cloud starts to look cartoonish and it just doesn't look very real or atmospheric. Here I'm painting in the distant hills on the horizon, and I'm keeping the values quite similar to that of the sky, as due to atmospheric perspective, things in the distance do become a lot lighter and they also become bluer, but I am pushing the blue a bit more than I see when I actually look at these hills in the distance, and I'm also avoiding adding too much detail into these areas. I'm trying to keep this distant level of the painting quite simple and actually to try and lose it a bit into the colour of the sky, and this will add to that sense of depth in the painting and push this area further back in space. Now I'm massing in the grass in the foreground. I'm trying to get this whole area covered as quickly as possible, as this enables me to see a more accurate visual impression of the scene overall. I am trying to get the approximate value and hue of this area. However, I will add colour shifts and details and refine the foreground quite a lot more, but this is a good base colour for me to work on top of. To paint these distant trees, I first mix a general light brown mix using raw umber, titanium white, and a touch of my permanent green. Then I'm picking out darker sections within these clumps of trees using a smaller brush. However, I'm not making these dark sections too dark. I'm not putting anything which is close to black. I'm just making them dark in relation to this lighter brown section of the trees. And it's always good to squint at the scene. It's always good to squint at the scene and see what happens to the dark sections, whether they still stand out when you squint or whether they get grouped into the same value section as what's around them. This is a good way of staying in control of the values within the painting. So this tree on the right hand side of the painting is going to be one of the focal points within the painting, and the nice thing about this tree is it brings a bit more attention to the foreground, and also where it sits on the painting, it breaks that line from the foreground into the background and then just into the sky, and this helps really cement this tree as being in the foreground of the painting, and as a result it also helps give the painting that sense of depth, showing that certain areas are certainly in the background as they're being overlapped by this tree. I also paint the shadows in this tree darker than I have done in the areas in the background of the painting, and that's because areas in the foreground do have more contrast, so the lights will appear lighter and the shadows will appear darker. I'm now painting in the tree which is on the left hand side of the painting, and it's still in the foreground, but it is lower down because it's lower down on the slope of the landscape, and by painting this in and comparing this to the other tree on the right, it just really helps convey that steep decline in the rolling hills of the landscape. Here, using a fine brush, I've just painted in a few cows in that second field, and I've just used one colour for the brown bodies of the cows, and then a small dash of white paint for their heads, and a small dash of dark green for the shadow which they're casting. So I hope you enjoyed that video of me painting here in Somerset. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out because I'm trying to grow the YouTube channel so that I can post more videos more regularly, so having a bigger number of watch times, subscribers and all of that stuff really helps with the channel. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at George Frederick Thomas. I post most of my artwork on there, so you can keep up to date with my latest paintings. There's also that little bell icon on YouTube that you can ring, and that way you'll get notifications when my new videos come out, so you won't miss any of my new content. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Check out my next video to watch me paint en plein air on a sunny spring day in Battersea Park in London.